Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and boy is it good to be back. The God Is Not Willing is the first in a planned trilogy serving as a sequel to the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It has been 10 years since Erikson released The Crippled God, and in that time he's been working on a lot of interesting projects. He has written 2 of a trilogy of Malazan prequels called the Trilogy. He has written a handful of novellas set in the Malazan world, and he has written the Willful Child Trilogy, which is a totally unrelated sci-fi series of books, basically spoofing science fiction and kind of basing all of its tropes in Star Trek, which he's a huge fan of. That prequel trilogy, whose final book Erikson is currently writing, came with a giant stylistic shift compared to the Malazan Book of the Fallen, as well as huge revelations regarding certain characters and facets of the world, to the extent that some fans even consider it a parallel canon as opposed to a direct prequel in the strictest sense of the word. So because of that, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from a sequel trilogy. I mean, is this going to be a direct sequel to the Malazan Book of the Fallen, or is this again going to sort of play with this idea of a singular canon and turn events on their heads in unexpected ways and that kind of thing? Well, the answer finally came on July 1st of this year, just a few days ago in fact, as the UK got access to The God Is Not Willing, whereas the US is slated for a release on November 9th of this year. Being a big fat stupid American myself, I was like not gonna wait that extra 4 months to get my hands on this book because, you know, instant gratification or bust. So I fortunately did find a guide on how to obtain an ebook version, I guess the UK version of the book, and I will link that in the description below so any other Americans like me that are just too impatient to wait until November can get on board. And yeah, I mean, after finding myself pretty much unable to put this book down, I'm thrilled to say I absolutely love this book. It is an extremely exciting start to a sequel trilogy that is definitely a direct sequel to the Malazan Book of the Fallen. There are so many aspects of this book that surprised me and delighted me as a huge fan of the main 10, and I want to talk about as many of them as I can without revealing any spoilers, because this is a spoiler-free review. I'll do a different video that is going to get into some more spoilery stuff, so if you haven't read yet, fear not, because we're not going to get into anything that could be considered a spoiler. So without further ado, let's break down The God Is Not Willing. So anyone who's read the Book of the Fallen knows just how much Erikson's prose developed over the course of that series. I mean, especially between the first 2 books, because Erikson wrote book 1, Gardens of the Moon, in like 1990, and then spent 10 years looking for a publisher. So in that 10 years before he wrote book 2, he had developed quite a bit already, and you can really tell as you go from book 1 to book 2. And then he pumped out the rest of that series in the next 10 years, 9 more books in the next 10 years. And again, in that 10 years, he develops quite a bit as well. Erikson was right from the get-go, certainly a very detailed and intricate writer, but as the series went on, he certainly got more comfortable embracing his humor, which is a fantastic aspect of his books, as well as his poetic understanding of the human condition. So now another 10 years have gone by, and once again, I have to say, it feels to me like Erikson has just continued to develop as a writer and really embrace his strengths and minimize his weaknesses. I mean, The God Is Not Willing displays all of those classic Erikson hallmarks at their most refined, and somehow also at their most approachable, if that's even possible. And this book is wickedly funny, wrenchingly poignant, boldly crass, beautifully poetic. I mean, at this point, Erikson could probably write a story about a character tying their shoes and would find some way to make it bitingly witty and hauntingly philosophical. I mean, I probably just sound like a desperate superfan, but I'm not even sorry. Like, he is just that good. So this was the biggest surprise of all for me. I mean, anyone who's read or has attempted to read the Book of the Fallen knows just how massive of an experience that is, and just how difficult it is to try and hold on to every single thread and every single character. I mean, it's not going to happen. On your first read of the Book of the Fallen, it is impossible to keep everything straight. So as I settled in to read The God Is Not Willing, I was preparing myself for that same insanely intimidating experience that we've come to know and love from the Book of the Fallen. So imagine my shock and my really pleasant surprise to find that The God Is Not Willing is, at least in comparison to the Book of the Fallen, a very focused and streamlined experience. Erikson has a very clear story to tell with this book, and he wastes no time getting down to brass tacks. And maybe as a consequence of that, this book is only half the length of some of the behemoths we see in the back half of the Book of the Fallen, and every single chapter serves its purpose swiftly and efficiently. I found the plot itself to be a page-turner in every sense of the word. I mean, Erikson's flair for intrigue and mystery just keeps you hooked from chapter to chapter. I mean, like I said before, I couldn't put it down. I tried to pace myself early on in the experience because I was like, all right, we're not going to get Malazan after this for a while, you know? So I'm like, okay, I got to savor every single word here. I spent like one day pacing myself, and then the next day I woke up and was like, just started. I couldn't help myself. So if the next two entries in this story follow suit, this trilogy is just going to end up feeling like this deliciously rewarding dessert that anybody who has earned deserves after getting through the unbelievably challenging Book of the Fallen. I mean, excellent and gratifying, but certainly challenging. Okay, a pretty controversial category when it comes to Erikson. If you're one of these people who thinks that Erikson's characterization is weak, I highly recommend reading his essay on the topic that I will link in the description down below, in which he basically writes the beginning of a short story off the top of his head, and he writes it two ways. He writes first with the sort of characterization that we're used to from most of his contemporaries, and then he rewrites it again sort of with his take on characterization. And I think it really effectively highlights what Erikson does so well about how he writes his characters. So despite this being a direct sequel to the Book of the Fallen, there are seldom few characters who actually cross over from that story into ours. There are a couple, and there are certainly some cameos, but for the most part, this is a group of fresh faces, and I was shocked to find just how quickly I was enamored with this brand new cast. There is a new group of lovably misfit Malazan Marines that, despite dominating, probably over half of the point of view time in this book, will still leave you wanting more. Their dysfunctional relationships and hilarious banner just had me grinning from ear to ear the entire time I was reading, if not outright laughing out loud on occasion. It's hard to talk about any of the other characters without getting into at least some spoiler territory, so I won't do any other specifics, but suffice it to say, I found Erikson's character work to be in top form. I was instantly drawn in by this cast in record time. Their highs are exultant, their lows are heartbreaking, and I just couldn't believe how swept up I found myself in their stories with remarkably few pages behind me. I think even the most rabid Erikson critics would agree that he's nearly unrivaled when it comes to world building. His history as an archaeologist and anthropologist is so clear when you read his work. It just shines through in his dozens of well-realized peoples, places, cultures, creatures, races, realms. The God Is Not Willing takes place 10 years after The Crippled God, and even though it focuses on a relatively small corner of just one continent of the Malazan world, Erikson has a lot of fun playing with the fallout and ramifications of the events from the main 10 books. Without getting into spoilers, there has been an exciting and logical evolution to so many aspects of the world, including warfare, magic, the pantheon, and more. Erikson's incredibly strong sense of how culture develops is on display, as always, and the fact that we're that much deeper into the story just makes it that much more fun to watch. Another area where Erikson excels brilliantly in the Book of the Fallen, and this is a worthy follow-up of that reputation. Frankly, at this point, I'd be disappointed if Erikson released a Malazan entry that didn't have profound statements on the nature of life, philosophy, psychology, and personhood, and he doesn't disappoint. These 500 pages are chock full of commentary on change, freedom, stupidity, ignorance versus innocence, and of course, compassion. Okay, at this point you probably know my feelings on this book. I hated it. No, of course not. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and at this point in time, I'm feeling like it's one of my favorite entries in the series, if not my single favorite entry in the series. Now, obviously, I just finished it a couple days ago. I'm still high on it. Maybe when I come down from Cloud 9, I'm going to be feeling differently. So let's not say anything we can't take back. But in the meantime, holy crap, am I thrilled with the beginning of this trilogy. If I had one negative thing to say about it, it would be that the fan service to the Book of the Fallen maybe went a little far in one scene for me. There's so much of how this book plays off of the Book of the Fallen that is so successful, and there was just one scene that I thought felt a little inauthentic to me, or maybe a little bit like what I might expect to see in a Malazan fan fiction compared to an actual Malazan entry from Erikson himself. So that was just for me, just one thing that overstepped that line a little bit, and maybe I'll feel differently on a reread. I can't get into any specifics, obviously, for spoilers, but I will bring that up again when I do a spoiler-filled video for this book. So look forward to talking to you guys about that soon. And in fact, I can't wait to talk about so much of this book with you guys soon. Malazan has such an amazing fan base, and you guys are so much smarter than me and pick up on so much stuff that I can only begin to guess at, or things that just go over my head completely. So I really can't wait to dive in with you guys and see the kinds of things that people are digging up. So get out there and get yourself a copy. I mean, if you want to be patient and wait till November because you're in the US and you're cool like that, good for you. I'm jealous of your self-control. But in the meantime, fuck you a little bit. Just go and get the copy and read it. We can all discuss, because oh my goodness, this is in the words of my fellow YouTuber Isker Jirak, this is legit. This book is legit. So so I hope you guys enjoyed this spoiler-free review of The God Is Not Willing. Please let me know your spoiler-free thoughts in the comments, and I can't wait to talk to you guys soon.